Hello and welcome to the Woman Being Podcast. I'm here today, as always, with the lovely Kelly Ann, Kelly, and myself, Emma. But you don't know our wonderful, wonderful guest we have today, Lana Cruz. She is here to talk to us about being a woman in the church and ministry. She is a pastor and a wife and a mother, and she has lots of amazing things to share with you guys. So let's dive in. Welcome to the Woman Being Podcast community,
where we explore thoughts and opinions
and have the freedom to change our minds.
Without expectation or judgment,
we will hold a safe space and support each other
as we navigate together in the form of feminine.
Here we are today with the lovely Lana Cruz, and we are really, really excited because she has a lot of amazing things to say about womanhood and about leading as a woman and stepping into that. So hello, Lana.
Hello.
First of all, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here and to dive in.
To dive in.
Dive right in there.
Yes. We're going to dive into everything today with Lana. And yeah, I guess let's just get started. So Lana, you're a pastor right now over a young adults ministry, and amidst that, you are also juggling just all the other things that come along with being a woman and a mother and a wife and all the many roles that you hold. So I came from a background where women weren't even allowed to pastor in a church in really any capacity. And actually the first time that I saw a woman speak in front of a multi-gendered audience was Havilah Cunnington.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's it.
I was going to say Cunningham or Cunnington. But and I think we're all familiar with her. So I guess I want to know, like, how has the process looked like for you in how you stepped into ministry? Like, what has that journey looked like for you?
Totally.
Yeah,
for
sure.
sure, totally. So I grew up in the church my whole life, and my dad was a pastor or wanting to be a pastor for most of my childhood. And for the longest time, I said, I never want to be a pastor's wife and I never want to marry a pastor. But yet somehow I became that and a pastor myself. But
ironic.
But because I grew up in the church and I grew up believing in God my whole life, and so the thing was is that I always loved God and I always wanted to have a relationship with Him. And so then that led me to church all the time, and my family was part of the church. And I was always a part of ministry. But I think when I got to a certain age, I started kind of putting the brakes on of like, but I don't want to be in ministry. Like, I want to love God, I want to go to church, but I don't want to be in ministry. Because for me, ministry looked like kind of dragging your family along wherever ministry called. Or for me, my parents ended in a divorce, and so I think I connected very much a lot of that together, and like reading past revivalists and how like some of their wives or families didn't make it, and like just this terrifying feeling of like, but if I get in ministry, it's this place that like tears apart families, or just is not this place that cultivates family. And then the other thing too was that I saw a woman in a church that I didn't want to be. It was the pastor's wife who either led the children's ministry or just made the tea or just kind of sat really nicely. And I'm like, but I don't want to be that. And so I think my perspective was, if you're in ministry, it has to look this way. But I continued to grow in my passion and my love for the Lord. So I was always in church environments and always was a part of ministry, even though I was like, so then it got to a kind of a point where I married a pastor, and so now I was officially a pastor's wife, but I'm like, but I still don't want to be a part of ministry. So that will be your thing, and I'll just kind of find my own thing. But then, so I was pursuing things outside of the church, but kind of slowly realizing certain things. Like, it was the first part of me that kind of started stirring was I love people. I love people like so much. I get fueled by them. I love interacting with them. And at the time I was like, okay, well, where are all the people at? Well, they're at this ministry school in our city. How can I get there and work there and be a part of that? So I started working in the ministry school, which was a huge step for me. And like, I still like had a huge like gap of like, okay, but I'm not going to put all of myself in. Anyways, long story short, shorter, my husband and I were having a conversation a few years back, and he kind of just was calling me out on some stuff, and he's like, Lana, I actually think you're called to ministry. And I'm like, but I can't, like, I don't feel like I can fully be who I want to be when I step inside, when I think about being a woman in ministry. And I just assume that I have to become this picture that I've seen or am seeing. I just assume that I have to become that in order to be a woman in ministry. And he's like, you don't. What if it's the fact that you get to bring everything that you are or want to be into the church environment, and actually that's what you're called to in ministry, is to bring that perspective of what it is to be a woman in the church and not become what you think you have to be in the church. And it just shifted so much of me. And honestly, it landed, my spirit and my soul just like landed, because for so many years I've always wondered, like, where's my thing? What's my calling? What place am I meant to influence? And it was like everything just settled in that truth. And it was all in a place that I was most afraid of, because it was this fear that I have to become whatever I'm seeing, and the reality that I could actually, that the church could be a place that you could change. The church could be a place that you could actually grow or bring a new idea to, or bring a new perspective to. And so that fueled very much my step into ministry, was this place of, I'm meant to bring something here. I'm meant to help change what I grew up only seeing, and bringing new perspective and new femininity, and what it is to be a woman in ministry, what it is to lead as a woman. And so that was my journey. It was pretty clunky and pretty, I had my heels in the ground for quite a few years. But yeah, like I said, it just settled something in my spirit. It was like my soul had been like searching all the time of like, where do I go? Where do I land? Like I did dance and fashion and interior design, like so many different things. And the Lord brought this in, and it was like, whew, like I just landed, like this is where I'm meant to bring myself and like of influence.
Yeah. Well, it's like the verse that comes to mind when you talk about like your family and other revivalists that we've seen, whose families have suffered. I feel like this verse always gets used, which is like, if you love me, you'll leave your wife behind. You'll leave everything behind to follow me. But then there's also like an not opposing. I mean, they have to come together somehow. But the alternative to that is that God loves family, and that He blesses family, and He creates big families all throughout the Bible, and that, you know, children and husbands and wives, it's all a blessing. And so it's hard to hold that intention as you're looking into ministry and trying to decide, like, okay, do I, like, what does this really mean? How do I love my family well and love you well? And if you love my family as much as you love me, so I don't know. I feel like that one gets...
Yeah, I mean, sure. You even you look at like one of the first people that God ever calls is Abraham, right? And He calls Abraham with family, and also calls Abraham into family. Like the whole covenant with him is surrounded around him building a family and having generations and generations that are going to come after him. And so I feel like that is such a testament to God's heart for family, to coexist with like your call and whatever, like that ministry shouldn't suffer because of, or ministry shouldn't suffer because of family, but family shouldn't suffer because of ministry either.
Absolutely. And I think holding like space for that, and like what sounds like your husband did for you in your years, like you got to just explore and do what you wanted and do your own thing. And I feel like leaders, pastors, revivalists, whatever, tend to pull their family along with them. And the fact that Chris created that space for you, that's really beautiful. Right. And then he was just like, hey, I think this is for you.
And I think too, like, he didn't write me off as like he saw something in me, which I think, and I would get words throughout my, like prophetic words throughout my life of like being in full-time ministry. And I was always like, nope, you got it wrong. You're not listening to the right voice. Like, but just that like I was clearly not wanting it, but yet that like, he held that with so much, like the Lord held that. And yeah, for sure. My husband held that with like being able to see what was truly underneath all the fear, which I'm so thankful for. I'm so thankful too that the Lord does that as well, that it's because our fear can bury so much that actually needs to be there. Yeah.
Bring it to light. And one of my favorite things that someone, I feel like it was a teaching or a Bible study at one point where they talked about how your first place of discipleship is in family. So like as a parent, your kids are your primary disciples. And that you build them up and teach them the way that they should go. And that is just as much ministry as the front facing.
Almost harder.
Oh, for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes. Well, because they're there all the time.
They're gonna hold you to everything you say. A crowd of people will not.
And so that brings me to this point that you're a woman in ministry, and that's not necessarily a path that is well trod. And it feels like a lot of women who go into ministry, you kind of have to bring your own self there, because no one's necessarily going to invite you. So how did that process work when you decided that you wanted to jump into ministry, and what sort of barriers or obstacles did you come up against?
Yeah, totally. So the first barrier was my own fear and my own perspective of what it was to be a woman in ministry. And so that in and of itself was just being quiet with the Lord long enough to be able to hear my inner voice saying, I want to do this, which I would have never expected for it to say. But I think once the seed was kind of sown in my mind of like, oh, could this be? Anyway, so the first barrier was just like getting over my own fears. But then it was me initiating and saying, this is what I want to do. Because for so long I said I didn't want to do this. So no one was going to be asking me to do something. No one was going to be saying, hey, Lana, we know you have a heart for this. Will you come and be a part of this? So it was me having to say and own, I want to do this. And for me, the opportunity that was in front of me was leading for the young adults ministry here with my husband. And so I set up an appointment with my husband in his office, and I said, hey, I want to lead, and I want to do this. I want to be a part of the team. And I came in as part of the team, not as a co-pastor, because I just wanted to start that way. And I think that in and of itself was the biggest barrier of like I was the one that had to pick myself up, like metaphorically off the floor and put myself into a spot, because no one was asking for me. No one was saying like, where's Lana? We need her to do something. And so I think just like the strength of self it took to be able to say, I'm terrified of this, but I know I'm supposed to do it, and I'm going to put myself in there. But then what comes with that is owning that place of like, hey, I said I wanted to lead, so now I have to show up and I have to lead, because it wasn't something that someone asked of me. So then I can just kind of like nonchalantly not show up because I'm like, oh, well, they asked me to be here. I don't really want to be here. I'm like, no, I want to be here. So I'm going to show up in the way that I want to lead, or even just how I can lead. And so once I did that, it was like, got over that first barrier of like fear and like picking myself up. It was amazing to then feel the like flow of where I was meant to be. And then from there, I think the barriers that I face are, I think because of having so many fears, it's like insecurities would come up of like, it's that thing of like you're saying, like there's not very many images which almost is a kind of a good thing, because there's not that many images to say like, oh, I should look like that or like that or like that. So then it can almost feel like, am I doing this right? And for me, it's like, okay, I'm not going to look like a man. And so what does that look like? Like, what do I, and especially doing it with my husband. So he would do certain things. I'm like, am I supposed to be doing that? But I don't feel to do that. But just having to trust and almost having to like forge a way at certain points, which can be a barrier because it can feel like, am I doing this right? Is this right? And so I would say those felt like the bigger barriers going in. Again, I get the privilege of leading with my husband, who is very obviously loving and open and gives me full reign to be who I am in the role now with him as co-pastor. But yeah, so for me, it's felt very open in the space that I've taken up. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I was just gonna say it's so interesting because you were kind of given that space to sort of hear the Lord and make a decision for yourself, and I feel like that might be even a benefit for women who are joining ministries, that no one's necessarily asking or expecting or obligating you into doing anything that you don't feel called to. And the flip side of that is when I was in ministry, I was constantly asked, like, when's Ross going to join? Like, is he thinking about coming on staff? Do you think, like, when's he going to get in here? And I had to, first of all, deal with my own expectations of what a spiritual leader in the household should look like. And, but then realize, okay, his calling doesn't have to be ministry for him to be holy, nor for me to be able to continue doing ministry. And so, but that was like the opposite of what you're saying, is everyone's like, well, when's he gonna, like, because obviously he's your husband, so he needs to be here.
There's an expectation for a man to lead in the church.
Yes.
Whereas there's more of an expectation that a woman wouldn't be interested or wouldn't want to take up the space, or
is too busy with her kids.
Her kids, for sure.
Or that you want to do things like run the bake sale or help in the children's ministry, which are beautiful, amazing things. Yeah. But, like, I feel like the leadership space in church has obviously been lacking a feminine touch for a long time. And now that more and more women are stepping up, obviously it can only benefit.
Yeah, totally. I think just the fact that, like, we are made in the image of God, male and female. If we're only ever being shown the male side of God, we're missing 50%. Like, that's a huge half of God that we're not getting expressed. And honestly, I think in general in the world, but in the church, like, the fullness of what a woman is not being fully expressed. And so therefore a fullness of God is not being expressed. And so I think that very much is my, like in my gut of, like, wanting to reveal to the church what the fullness of being a woman is, and not just what we've been kind of trained or tailored into of this is what a Christian woman looks like. And
that's really good.
It's like you can do, like, that can happen in the side conversations and kind of behind the scenes, but also it's like that has to be displayed, like you're saying, to a like multi-gender room where it's both to male and female, seeing the fullness of a woman being expressed. So just very,
that's really good.
Well, and in the fullness of a woman, we see the fullness of God.
Right.
And not the fullness, but like him being fully expressed through female. He was created in his image.
Yes.
And we're missing out on that
totally
in a lot of areas.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm even wondering, like, as you were saying that, we call out the church a lot in this podcast. We've all worked through our own things.
Yeah.
And I'm even wondering if part of the brokenness that's happening in the church is due to the lack of femininity and the strength that it can add.
Yeah.
And, we are getting, for the most part, a 50% picture.
Yeah.
If it's only male-led.
Yes.
And, like, the more we help paint that fullness, maybe the healthier the better,
right,
and the more whole we'll all become.
Totally.
I mean, if the church is a body, you can't function with half a body.
Yeah, right.
It doesn't work.
Yeah. Or even there being only like two types of women expressed.
Functioning with 75% of a body.
Yeah.
Still not great.
Still not good.
Still not fully functioning.
Yeah.
So, actually, what you're saying makes me think of a quote that Kamala Harris has been saying a lot on her campaign trail. I don't know if this comes out before or after the election, but at the moment they are campaigning. And regardless of what do you think about Kamala Harris, she's been saying this really great quote, which is something that her mother told her, which was, you may be the first to do a lot of things, but make sure that you're not the last. Because as a woman, and then she's also a woman of color, like she is pioneering a lot of things. She is currently the first woman of color to be nominated for vice president. And so like you are walking around without a rule book, you know, like you don't have the set example of what this should look like. You may have a few examples, but that also don't even necessarily align with who you are as a woman, you know, whereas men have a full roster, an abundance of men they can look to as examples of men in ministry, which is unfortunate because women have so many great qualities that they bring to the table. I would love to hear like some of those qualities that you see in women that are great for leadership, that are worth having, that are that half the body that we're missing.
Yeah, totally. You know? Yeah. I mean, I think that women are excellent communicators. Like, I think that there's just something, like, I think women just know how to communicate about things or are articulate. Maybe some women might say, like, I stumble over my words or whatever. But I think that there's a level of communication that women are actually really amazing at, which requires women to speak and to say what they have to say. And I think women are so wise. Like, if they can tap into that, like, sensitivity, like, women are so sensitive and attuned and discerning that if they can, one, trust themselves and then be in an environment where people trust them, it's like you just tap into something that's so close to, like, Holy Spirit presence. Like, that's just so raw and like otherworldly, like it's supernatural almost. Like, I think that not that men can't, but I just think women, I mean, I think that they're pegged as like, oh, you're just overly sensitive or you're too emotional. But actually, I think that's such a great strength of women, their emotions and their ability to tap into and be sensitive to what is going on in a room or what's going on inside of them, what the Lord is saying to them, and then speaking it out. I think that that's a huge strength. And it's that place of trust, because even like just hearing stories of different things in the past, like that's the part that's almost scariest for men or for trusting women in leadership, of like, what is she going to say? Like, is she going to be kind of go off the rails or sound crazy or whatever, which I think there is a line for sure, but I think that's the like risk of that sensitivity of like being able to like take you places where that isn't linear. It's like very much almost, I can't find the word, like ethereal, like it's supernatural. It's like Holy Spirit, but it's that place that isn't linear, and it's from the gut and the heart and the tapping into those emotions and sensitivity that I think is so powerful and so needed, especially for people that are just like hungry to heal or hungry to like have that closeness of the Father that is that very much nurturing side of him. I think that that's the side of the Lord that women bring out, is that like nurturing, but also like it's I read this thing one time that women know what to do with small things. They know how to, it's like the image of a mother bringing up a child from like the most vulnerable, innocent little thing, but being able to watch it and protect it and nurture it till it's fully grown. Like, women know what to do with small, vulnerable things and how to protect them and care for them and give them life, that I'm like, that is what the Father brings as his side of a woman.
Yeah.
And that is what women bring when they get to fully be in an environment and in any environment, but like, especially the church, I think just because throughout history, it's been a little bit capped on what a woman can do.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
well, that's such a beautiful picture too of the Father and of Christ, and how he takes the smallest, most vulnerable humans in our susceptibility to sin and falling away, and he forms us and shapes us into people of God.
Yeah.
And like the women are modeling that and are nurturing characteristics, which is beautiful.
Yeah, I really love that image of a woman bringing up small things. Like, I've never really thought about that in that way, recognizing that women have been given this inherent ability to take something that might seem small and insignificant and then to grow it into something big and beautiful, and like you bear so much like capacity for responsibility with that. And so I really love that imagery. And even like you're talking about how we bring out all these feminine aspects of God and that are very sort of like ethereal and ooey wooey or whatever you want to call it. It's the official term for it.
You heard it here.
Like I think about how like Holy Spirit is called Spirit of Wisdom, right? And wisdom is a woman in the Old Testament.
Yes.
Like wisdom is personified in the feminine. And even if you look at the original writings in the Bible, like a lot of times Holy Spirit is given feminine pronouns. And I feel like that's such a testament to the fact that like there really is this feminine side of God. It's like, just because I think we can get in our heads of thinking of God as very masculine because we call him he and Jesus is a man and all these things. But like, look at like all of the ways that Jesus was so gentle and all of the ways that he was so nurturing, and look at the same thing in Holy Spirit as well. And even in Father God, like you see that going throughout the Bible, and you see women empowered in the Bible so much. It's like kind of wild to me how we sort of have forgotten about a lot of that. I feel like
and a lot of women we see too in the Bible are like badass.
Badass.
You know, like it's not like, the sweet submissive wife did her duty and that was her calling.
You
like,
pretty much never see that narrative.
Like, look at Deborah.
That
she's a woman in the Bible. The Bible doesn't make any commentary about this, about like she was a woman and she rose above the stereotype. Like, there's nothing like that. But she's a prophetess,
unheard of,
and she stepped in and she kills people with the jawbone of a donkey, and she's just like hardcore.
Yeah. It's so strange how like even as women, we've misconstrued women in our own minds, of like even the thing of like thinking about caring for a child can almost feel like light or like meaningless. But when you break it down to like, no, you are like patiently enduring, watch and like protecting and someone until they can then take care of themselves, or even just like the act of labor. If you want to see the potential that a woman has, watch her give birth to a baby. It is the most insane experience, heightened experience of my life. But it's this thing of like, we even have this like ill perspective of the things that make up a woman. I think because they've been talked down for so long, like, oh, you're the mother, you're the wife, and those things are in the light of like negativity, when really it's like they carry all of those attributes that are so incredibly powerful when you actually look at what it means to do those things. Yeah.
That's so good. I mean, I just remember growing up, like I would always crave there's always the word about like Mary of like, oh, do to me, Lord, like what you see, whatever the verse is. But I always craved like, give me the Deborahs, give me the Ruths, give me the women that are like going against the grain. And that's what I always just like craved. And there's a teacher that I follow that talks about like what you were saying, like women are the healers. Women are the empaths. Women, there's a wild woman, there's a wise woman, like a crone energy is what she talks about, that we all have, that is a reflection of the divine.
Yeah.
And I love what you're saying.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder, like, as you've been in leadership and drawn out your womanhood as you lead, how does that change and affect the way you lead others? And how do you feel like that impacts those you lead? Because it brings so much beauty and so much extra gifts.
Yeah, totally. I think it's not trying to be a man, which is like the image of like hustle and work and go hard and be loud and be just this like almost proof to be strong. And it's not the like, oh, well, then I guess I have to like fall into this like almost like this weak perspective that we have on women, that they can only do this. But it's there's like, no, there has to be another way. Like I think going into church as a woman, I'm like, there has to be another way. And so I think that I fight to go in as myself and letting those things out as they come up. Like if I show up to lead and I'm feeling super like vulnerable and sensitive, I'm going to be super vulnerable and sensitive. If I show up and I feel like I want to fight a bear, I'm going to fight a bear. Or if I feel like I'm going to be like, like stripped down and wild, like obviously like within the realms of like, I do not care what anyone thinks of me, I'm going to be as like outlandish as I feel to be. It's that place of allowing myself to be what it is. And leading through that, because I think that so much of my heart is to represent women and to show women that you can fully be who you are in this environment. You don't have to look like this. You don't have to look like this. You don't even have to look like me. But I want authenticity to ooze out of everything that I do, because I just so desperately want women and men, but in the church too, because it's like, it is true, the church has been getting like a horrible rap, and it makes me so sad, because I'm like, oh, like people are running away from God when really they were hurt by a human. And God is the only one that will bring that amount of freedom, that amount of life to them, and their perspective of like being hurt or squashed by the church that's human. Like, and that's so sad that like, but that's just how it is. Like a church is run by humans in order to host God and like bring God to people. And it's sad when that gets skewed or not done well. So I think that, I think that in a word, it's authentic. Like I just very much want to be my authentic self, even in my frustrations or like fears or whatever they are. Like I just want to be authentic and lead through that way, and show them that you can be here. Like you can be here like that. And
Well, and that makes me think of, and I've been reflecting on this a lot, is that women have a cycle that we go through. And there are times when we have a lot of energy and a lot of power, and there are times when there's less of that.
Yes.
And I feel the more I've reflected on this, the more I've realized I've felt so much pressure to be steady day after day after day after day. The same person this time as I was this time, which is what men have. They have a 24-hour cycle, which is fascinating to me, that they just start in the morning and finish in the evening, and it's the same every day. Yeah. And so I feel like our society actually sometimes requires that of women to be the same. But what you're talking about is, what if we were authentic to the cycle and to who we are and the way that God created us to be?
Yes.
Which kind of blows my mind.
Yeah, totally. And For sure, which I'm so geeking out on that topic currently in my life. But with that, it's like, it's not, because I think too that can be the perspective of women is like, oh, they're just so like wishy-washy, or they can't just like stick to something, or that's another like narrative that makes them feel like they're too soft, or like they're not like firm and like stable. And when it's not being careless, it's being actually so intentional and so in tune, which requires you to have that like strength of self to be able to trust what's going on actually, or it requires that ability to even be quiet long enough to know what's going on inside of you, and then trust enough to like trust that like what's going on inside of you is right. And then that strength of self to then be that, even though you see everyone fighting to be this certain way. And so I think that that requires so much intentional steps along the way. And it's not this like, well, I just don't feel like it. Like that is just not, that is so far from that. And I mean, I could geek out on syncing to your menstrual cycle, but yeah, I think just a lot of it is just that. It's intentional trust and knowing and studying yourself, and like, who are you even? Like, what has God made you to be? What is inside of you that he's put there for a reason? And which requires a lot of dynamics.
I think that like the way that women sort of go through this cycle of temperament and of energy and just the way that they're presenting themselves throughout a month, like that doesn't make us wishy-washy. That actually makes us diverse.
Yes.
Like that means that we can be many things.
Yes.
And that when we're honing in on that, we are then like super efficient.
Yes.
And we are also like at times in like super Sabbath mode, you know,
yes,
and that's
right.
which allows us to then go back into like that super efficiency. And I think like in a way, I mean, I think it makes us really cool, honestly.
Yes.
Like it's like
and probably teaches the whole world to rest. Yeah. Like when women learn how to like tap into that part where it's like it is just rest, that, and yet they're so strong like when they're done. I think
real rest.
Yes, real rest. Yeah. That's, I think that is like a huge component that if women, it's like women I think are going to be the ones to teach that, but we need to get that of like we're deserving of it, where our bodies actually need it.
Totally.
And knowing that like inspiration will come again, creativity will come again, like going and getting stuff done will come again. Which is all that trust. I think if we have this, if we think that if we stop, almost like if we stop, the whole world will keep going, and we won't be able to catch up, or we'll miss out. And it's so much trust. Yeah.
I mean, unfortunately, women have not been educated about their bodies for a long time. And I feel like we're still learning so much about the way that the woman's body works, because we're living in a man's world, you know?
It's a whole other podcast.
Yeah, it is. That's like a whole other topic. But
stay tuned. It's coming.
I think, though, like what women have the privilege of reflecting, and I'm just processing this in the moment, is Jesus is the lion and the lamb. And we are sometimes the lion and sometimes the lamb. And it's not always the same. We don't step in and punch walls down and kick butt every day. Sometimes we're soft and meek, and all of that is a reflection of the Savior. And we have that privilege of being able to hold both authentically in our being. Which totally. They don't go together, but they do. And so that's amazing, incredible. And as a woman in leadership, you stepping in get to begin to model that for the people that you're ministering to.
Yeah. And I was fortunate enough to step into it saying that was allowed there, which I think that's maybe not the case a lot of the times. And you might have to, either find a place where that is allowed. It may not be as big of a place as you would want it to be, but finding wherever it is where you can do that and then like watch it grow, watch it cultivate. But
yeah, just like the baby.
Yes, right.
Even if you only have a small thing.
Yeah.
I believe that a woman can take a small thing and make it amazing and huge.
Yes.
Yeah.
Totally.
I was curious, what do you recommend for women who are wanting to step into leadership and in approaching this big, scary thing in the church?
Yeah, totally. I think it's a place of, like we were mentioning before, that there aren't a lot of, there are amazing women in leadership, phenomenal women in ministry that you can look to. But at the same time, there are so many diverse women that we are saying, like, the pool of men is very large, the pool of women is not as large. So it can feel like if I'm stepping into this, I have to look like this or like this, kind of like the few options that are shown. I think it's finding out what it is that you carry and what you bring, and what is it that you're wanting to bring to the realm of church. What is it that you want to influence? What is it that you want to represent in church, in ministry, and fight for that, like fight to bring that. I think also too, like finding your own perspectives and wisdom in spirituality. Like, I think unless, like, if you're brought up in the church, you can kind of have your Sunday school stories or the things that you've kind of carried on throughout your whole life. But then at a certain point as an adult, there is some unlearning and some relearning, or some learning that just never happened, that you then have to dive in for yourself to form your own, not your own beliefs where it's like you're going to have your own belief system that's different than everyone else, but just that you have something that you're owning. You're not going in with beliefs just because that's what mom and dad taught you growing up. You're going in with, this is what I believe, my convictions, and then you're able to then lead people into that belief and have something to say, have something to actually pave the way on. So I think in that is finding spiritual leaders and spiritual guides, in essence, like in that even can be through books or podcasts where you're learning and you're taking in knowledge on spirituality, knowledge on the Bible, knowledge on whatever it is, like whatever it is within the realm of leading in the church environment that you feel drawn to. Learn, like become a learner of that, so that you actually have something to bring to the table. And it doesn't have to be the same thing that the other person is passionate about or what they're bringing to the table. You get to bring in whatever it is that you're connected to and passionate about. And so I think for me, that was even huge, of like, there would be books that my husband was reading. I'm like, I have no interest in reading that at all. But then all of a sudden I would come upon these authors where I'm like, I come alive at the way that you teach spirituality, the way that you teach these things. And I would just read book after book by them. And that kind of started building this like spiritual framework, this spiritual like treasure chest of like how I approach spirituality, how I approached the church and leadership. And then that became how I led, and that became how I taught, and that became how I interpreted or heard from the Lord. So I would say definitely become a student of yourself and knowing like, who am I, what am I bringing, and then a student of spirituality and of the Lord and what it is that he's calling you to study and bring. And yeah,
that's good.
That's amazing. Mm-hmm. That's very good. Mm-hmm. I love that, because like knowing God is knowing yourself better, mm-hmm. and vice versa. Like as you get to know your true self, you're knowing the person that God has created you to be.
Yeah.
But I want to sort of we're starting to wrap up now. And I want to ask you a question that we ask all of our guests that come on. You can sort of interpret it however you like, but the question is, what does woman being mean to you?
Yeah. I think it means a lot of what I've said already, which I feel like a broken record, but it's just it of like just knowing, being yourself, being the woman that you are, being the person that you are, understanding and knowing that we're each, like there are so many women, but each woman is her own woman, and finding out what and who that person is, which can feel intimidating because it's like, where do I even start? But I think that's then the adventure. It's like, okay, there's this person almost like hidden in there that I get to discover and find. And you'll know when you find it. You'll know when you find her. And I think it probably comes in waves, but I think always being on that journey to fully be yourself, which is so many people talk about it, but it's just so profound and true when people actually do that, when they're not being someone else or trying to be someone else, they're just themselves. And so I think woman being is being the woman that you are. Yeah.
Authenticity is always powerful. It's always the most powerful option.
And terrifying.
Yes.
So
and terrifying and vulnerable.
It's so brave. It's so brave to be yourself.
Yeah. Well, then obviously you have so much wisdom, and I would love to glean from some of the resources that you might have in your life. So 2 questions. 1, what's on your nightstand right now?
Okay. And
2, what recommended resources would you recommend to us, the audience, and just any woman?
Yeah, totally. On my nightstand right now are 2 books. I don't like to do this, but it happens often where I end up reading 2 books at the same time. But is In the Flow. It's called In the Flow by Alisa Vitti. It's all about syncing your life around your menstrual cycle, which is profound. I heard it and I cried, and I'm like, why does not every woman know this thing that each week your hormones are at a different level, which means you should be eating certain things and doing certain activities. It's mind-blowing, and it like truly changes your life. So I'm reading that right now. And then I'm also reading The Return of the Prodigal Son by Henry Nouwen, who is just a phenomenal spiritual leader. And he is one that I like just connect so much to him and his depth and the way that he speaks about spirituality and the Lord. But it's just a beautiful picture. He breaks down this Rembrandt painting of the prodigal son and just essentially breaks down how we are all the prodigal son, but yet we're all trying to become the father. It's breathtaking, and it's just so deep and rich. So those are the 2 books I'm reading right now.
I love that.
Yeah. And then a huge one that was like a life changer for me as a woman, because I think as a woman in the church, I kept trying to find books written by Christian women to articulate or like help me find myself. And I just could never find it. And I would try book after book. I'm like, I just don't relate to the women that they are talking about in these books. But then I picked up the book Women Who Run with Wolves by Clarissa Pinkhart Estes. And it changed my life because it breaks down, or she just describes a woman in a way that I'm like, that is who I am and that is who I want to be. She's also the one that I heard talk about the concept of a woman knows what to do with small things, and so the other recommendations I have are the author Ruth Haley Barton. She's another spiritual leader that I have followed and read so much of her writings, and she has a podcast which is phenomenal. But the first book I read from her was The Invitation to Solitude and Silence. It's that concept of being able to be quiet and still long enough that you can actually hear the Lord, that you can actually hear yourself. Her other book, Sacred Rhythms, isn't fantastic. And then another spiritual leader, which I love as well, is Ronald Rolheiser. There it is. It's a hard one to say, but Domestic Monastery and Sacred Fire are the ones I've read by him that are life-changing.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yes.
So many recommendations to add to our reading
Gotta
list.
add that to my list.
Yeah, great. Well, Lana, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Is there any way that you'd want people to connect with you, or where people could find you and just look at your beautiful face or whatever?
Yes, my cute kids. You can find me on Instagram, which is at Lana Cruz. I am not a frequent poster, but when I do, it's worth it. Yes.
You just got to watch out for those little golden nuggets.
Makes the heart grow fonder.
You just keep the people waiting and just wanting more from you. Well, that's great. You can also follow us at Woman Being Podcast on Instagram. Our website's womanbeingcommunity.com. And be sure to tell us how much you loved Lana's episode. God, I keep doing that in my head.
Think banana.
Yes, Lana's episode. Tell us in the reviews. Tell us in the comments. Help us out with the algorithm. That would be great. And we would love to hear what you guys think about all the amazing things she had to say. And we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.